Karoline Leavitt stepped out of the cold morning air and into the warmth of the FBI headquarters. The building loomed tall in front of her, its glass windows reflecting the gray sky above. She pulled her navy blue coat tighter around herself, trying to shake off the chill that had settled deep in her bones. Her breath fogged up slightly as she exhaled, but it wasn't just the weather making her feel uneasy. Something about this place felt heavy, like the walls themselves were watching her every move. She walked through the automatic doors, her footsteps echoing softly against the polished marble floor. Inside, the lobby buzzed with activity. Agents hurried past her, some carrying folders, others talking on phones or tapping away at tablets. Security guards stood near metal detectors, their eyes scanning the room for anything out of the ordinary. Karoline knew she didn't belong here. She hadn't been invited, and she certainly hadn't been expected. Yet, here she was, standing, in the middle of one of the most secure buildings in the country, clutching a worn leather folder close to her chest. At the front desk, a man named Steve Bennett sat typing on his computer. He looked up when he noticed her approach. His uniform was crisp, and his badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. It was clear he wasn't used to random visitors walking in without an appointment. Karoline hesitated for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "I need to speak to someone," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, almost too soft to hear over the hum of the busy lobby. "It's important." Steve raised an eyebrow. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Karoline admitted, "but I think you'll want to hear what I have to say." Before Steve could respond, a loud alarm blared throughout the building. Red lights flashed along the ceiling, casting eerie shadows across the walls. People stopped moving, frozen in place as they tried to figure out what was happening. Even Steve turned pale, his hand instinctively reaching for the radio clipped to his belt. "What's going on?" Karoline asked, though no one seemed to hear her. Everyone was too busy scrambling to understand the source of the alarm. Monitors, mounted on the walls, suddenly flickered to life, displaying a single line of text in bold white letters. Subject K482 located. The message repeated itself over and over again, filling the screens in every direction. Murmurs spread quickly among the agents and staff. Some exchanged worried glances, while others grabbed their weapons and rushed toward the exits. Steve stared at the monitors, then back at Karoline. There was something different about her now. Her calmness stood out sharply against the chaos erupting around them. She didn't look surprised or panicked like everyone else. Instead, she appeared almost resigned, as if she'd known this moment would come sooner or later. "Do you know what that means?" Steve demanded, pointing at the screens. His tone had shifted from polite curiosity to suspicion. Karoline nodded slowly. "Yes," she said simply, "and I'm pretty sure it's referring to me." The security guard blinked, unsure whether to believe her. "You're saying that you're subject K482? "Not exactly," Karoline replied. "But I know who or what they're looking for." Steve hesitated, torn between protocol and gut instinct. Finally, he pressed a button on his radio. "We've got a situation down here," he announced. Someone matching the description just walked in. Within minutes, 2 agents arrived at the front desk. One was a woman with sharp features and dark hair tied neatly into a bun. Her name tag read Agent Laura Hayes. The other was a man with sandy blonde hair and a determined expression. His badge identified him as Agent Ryan Mitchell. Both carried themselves with authority, their eyes scanning Karoline with equal parts caution and curiosity. "Explain yourself," Laura said, stepping forward. Her voice was steady, commanding attention without raising it. Karoline took a deep breath. She knew this moment would define everything that came next. If she couldn't convince these people to listen to her, things could spiral out of control very quickly. "My name is Karoline Leavitt," she began. "I'm not here to hurt anyone, but there's something you need to know, something big enough to explain why your alarms are going off right now." Ryan crossed his arms. "Start talking." "I'm part of a government experiment," Karoline continued. "A secret project called Aegis. They Modified me. Gave me abilities that aren't exactly normal. Laura narrowed her eyes. Abilities? Like what? Karoline glanced at the monitors, still flashing the same cryptic message. Like knowing things before they happen. Like being able to sense danger before it strikes. And like whatever system you have set up to detect people like me, just flagged my presence here. The agents exchanged glances. They weren't ready to trust her yet, but her explanation lined up too well with what they were seeing to dismiss outright. Come with us, Laura said after a pause. We'll take you somewhere we can talk more privately. As they led her away from the front desk, whispers followed them. Other agents whispered to each other, speculating about who she was and why she had triggered such a dramatic response. Some eyed her warily, while others seemed intrigued. Whatever Project Aegis was, it clearly wasn't common knowledge, even within the FBI. They brought her to a small interrogation room tucked away in a quieter part of the building. The space was sparse, with only a table, 3 chairs, and a camera mounted in the corner. Karoline sat down opposite Laura and Ryan, setting her leather folder on the table between them. For the first time since entering the building, she allowed herself to relax slightly. She knew she couldn't turn back now. Whatever happened next depended entirely on how much she was willing to reveal, and how much they were willing to believe. So, Ryan said, leaning forward. Tell us everything. Karoline opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say anything, the lights in the room dimmed briefly, then returned to full brightness. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Karoline felt it. A shiver ran down her spine as she realized that whoever, or whatever was behind all this wasn't done with her yet, and neither were they. Karoline sat in the small, dimly lit room with her hands resting on the table. The leather folder in front of her remained unopened, its contents still a mystery to the 2 agents watching her closely. Laura Hayes and Ryan Mitchell exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of skepticism and curiosity. They had heard strange stories during their time at the FBI, but nothing quite like this. Start from the beginning, Laura said, her tone firm but not unkind. What is Project Aegis? Karoline took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. She knew she had to choose her words carefully. If she revealed too much too quickly, they might think she was lying or delusional. But if she held back, they might never trust her enough to help. Project Aegis began years ago, Karoline began. It was supposed to be a top-secret government program aimed at creating enhanced humans. People who could do things regular humans couldn't. Ryan leaned back, in his chair, crossing his arms. Enhanced how? Karoline hesitated for a moment before answering. Some of us were given physical strength beyond normal limits. Others developed heightened senses, better hearing, sharper vision. But the most advanced subjects, we got something else entirely. Like what? Laura pressed. Things that sound impossible, Karoline admitted. Telepathy, precognition, even the ability to manipulate energy fields around us. At least that's what the scientists told me. The room fell silent as the agents processed her words. It was clear they weren't convinced yet. To them, it all sounded like science fiction. But Karoline wasn't finished. The project started with good intentions, or so they claimed. They wanted to create defenders for humanity, people who could protect Earth against threats we didn't even know existed. Alien technology, extraterrestrial life forms, things like that. Laura raised an eyebrow. Aliens? You're telling us aliens are real? Not just real, Karoline corrected. They've been here for decades, maybe longer. Some of their tech was recovered after crashes. That's where the idea for Project Aegis came from. They thought they could use alien technology to enhance human biology. Ryan let out a low whistle. This is getting wild. So you're saying the government experimented on people using alien tech? Karoline nodded. That's exactly what I'm saying. And it worked, at first. We became stronger, faster, smarter. But then, things went wrong. What do you mean things went wrong? Laura asked, leaning forward slightly. Some of us couldn't handle the changes, Karoline explained. Our minds weren't built for what they did to us. We started losing control. Seeing things that weren't there, hearing voices. Some of us snapped. And you? Ryan asked. Did you snap? No, Karoline replied firmly. I learned to suppress my abilities. I fought to keep them under control because I didn't want to end up like the others, like Ethan. Ethan? Laura repeated. Who's Ethan? Karoline's expression darkened. Ethan Cole. He was one of the first subjects. Brilliant, strong, fearless, but also reckless. He embraced his powers instead of fighting them, used them to get whatever he wanted. Money, power, revenge. When the project leaders tried to stop him, he disappeared. Vanished without a trace. Laura frowned. And now he's back? That's why your alarms went off, Karoline said. He must have resurfaced somewhere nearby. Close enough for your systems to detect him and me. Ryan glanced at the camera in the corner, then back at Karoline. You're saying both of you triggered the alert? Yes, Karoline confirmed. But there's a difference between us. I came here willingly because I want to stop him. Ethan, on the other hand, he has no intention of stopping. Why does he need to be stopped? Laura asked. Because he wants to expose everything, Karoline replied. Everything about Project Aegis. About the experiments, the alien tech, the cover-ups. He thinks it's the only way to hold the government accountable. But if he succeeds, it won't just be the government that suffers. Everyone will panic. Chaos will spread. People will die. The gravity of her words hung heavy in the air, for a moment. Neither agent spoke. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. How do we know you're telling the truth? He asked. You could be working with him for all we know. Karoline met his gaze steadily. If I were working with him, I wouldn't have walked into FBI headquarters and set off every alarm in the building. I'm risking my life by being here. Because if Ethan finds out I'm helping you, he'll come after me. Laura studied her face intently, searching for any sign of deception. All she saw was determination and fear. Whatever Karoline was hiding, it wasn't lies. Okay, Laura said finally. Let's say we believe you. What happens next? You need to find Ethan before he acts, Karoline replied. He won't wait long. Once he knows I'm here, he'll move fast, faster than you can imagine. Ryan sighed. Even if we believe you, we don't have much to go on. No leads, no evidence, just your word. Karoline reached for the leather folder and opened it, revealing a stack of documents inside. Take a look at these, she said, sliding them across the table. They're records from the project. Locations, names, dates, everything I managed to smuggle out before they shut it down. Laura picked up the papers and began flipping through them. Her eyes widened as she skimmed the contents. These look legit, she muttered. If this is true, it's bigger than anything we've dealt with before. It is, Karoline agreed. And it's only going to get worse unless we act now. Ryan leaned forward, studying one of the documents. There's a name here, Alan Price. Does that mean anything to you? Karoline nodded grimly. He was one of the lead scientists on the project. If anyone knows where Ethan might be, it's him. Laura stood up abruptly. We need to talk to Alan, right away. As the agents prepared to leave the room, Karoline called out to them. Wait, there's one more thing. They turned back to face her, waiting. If you bring Alan in, make sure he doesn't know I'm involved, Karoline warned. He hates me, thinks I'm a failure. If he finds out I'm helping you, he'll do everything he can to sabotage us. Laura nodded slowly. Understood. Stay here. We'll handle this. Once the door closed behind them, Karoline slumped back in her chair, exhaling deeply. She had taken the first step, but the hardest part was still ahead. Convincing the agents was just the beginning. Finding Ethan and stopping him would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Outside the interrogation room, Laura and Ryan moved quickly down the hallway. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. The stakes were higher than ever, and time was running out. As they approached Alan Price's office, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far bigger. and far more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. When they entered the office, Alan looked up from his desk, startled by their sudden appearance. His face paled as he recognized the seriousness in their expressions. Whatever they wanted, it wasn't good news. "We need to talk," Laura said, closing the door behind them. "About Project Aegis." Alan stared at them, his mind racing. He hadn't heard that name in years, but the memories came flooding back instantly. Painful, haunting memories of experiments gone wrong and lives destroyed. He knew this moment would come eventually. Now, it seemed, the past had finally caught up with him. Alan Price sat frozen in his chair, staring at Laura and Ryan as if they were ghosts from a nightmare he'd tried to forget. His office was tidy but impersonal, filled with shelves of files and books that looked untouched for years. A single desk lamp cast a soft glow over the room, highlighting the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "What do you know about Project Aegis?" Laura asked, her voice calm but firm. She placed the documents Karoline had given them on his desk, letting him see the familiar markings and codes scrawled across the pages. Alan's eyes darted to the papers and his face went pale. He didn't need to read them to recognize what they were. The weight of the past crashed down on him like a tidal wave, dragging memories he'd buried deep back to the surface. For a moment, he said nothing, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of his desk. "You shouldn't have these," Alan finally whispered, his voice shaky. "They're classified, dangerous." "That's why we're here," Ryan said, stepping closer. "We need answers. Now, who is Ethan Cole and where can we find him?" The mention of Ethan's name made Alan flinch. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as if trying to push away the thoughts swirling in his mind. Ethan. He was one of our first successes. Brilliant, capable, fearless, but also unstable. We pushed him too far, gave him too much power. When he turned against us, we couldn't stop him. Laura crossed her arms. "What kind of power are we talking about? Telepathy? Precognition?" "All of it," Alan admitted. "And more. Some subjects developed abilities we couldn't even explain. Energy manipulation, reality distortion. It was like they weren't human anymore. Ethan embraced those changes completely. He saw himself as superior, untouchable." Ryan glanced at the documents again. "And Karoline Leavitt? What about her?" Alan's expression darkened. "Karoline, she was different. She resisted, fought against her abilities instead of embracing them. That's why I always thought she was weak, a failure. But maybe..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Maybe I underestimated her." Laura leaned forward. "Tell us everything you know about Ethan. Where would he go? What's his next move?" Alan hesitated, clearly torn between loyalty to the project and the fear of what Ethan might do next. Finally, he sighed. "If Ethan's resurfaced, it means he's planning something big, something catastrophic. He wants revenge for what we did to him, for what we did to all of them." "Revenge how?" Ryan pressed. "He'll target the heart of the system," Alan explained. "Government buildings, military installations, anything that represents authority. He believes exposing the truth will bring justice, but it'll only cause chaos. Panic. Death." Laura exchanged a worried glance with Ryan. If Alan was right, they were running out of time. "Do you have any idea where he might be now?" "There's an old research facility," Alan said after a pause. "In the mountains. It was abandoned years ago when the project shut down. If Ethan's regrouping, that's where he'll start." Ryan pulled out his phone and began typing coordinates into a map app. "We'll check it out. In the meantime, you stay put. Don't contact anyone or leave this building." Alan nodded reluctantly, though it was clear he wanted no part of whatever was coming next. As Laura and Ryan left his office, they could feel the weight of their mission pressing down on them. They needed to move fast, and they needed help. Back. In the interrogation room, Karoline waited anxiously, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. She hadn't heard anything since Laura and Ryan left, and the silence was suffocating. Every second felt like an eternity. each tick of the clock echoing louder than the last. Finally, the door opened and the two agents walked in. Their expressions were grim, and Karoline knew immediately that something was wrong. "We found a lead," Laura said, sitting down across from her. "An old research facility in the mountains. Alan thinks Ethan might be there." Karoline nodded, though her stomach churned with unease. It makes sense. He'd go somewhere isolated, somewhere familiar. But if he's really there, you'll need backup, more than just the two of you. Ryan frowned. "You're not coming with us." "I am," Karoline insisted. "You don't understand Ethan like I do. You don't know what he's capable of. Without me, you won't stand a chance." Laura hesitated, glancing at Ryan. They both knew she was right. As much as they hated to admit it, they needed her. "Fine," Laura said finally. "But you follow our orders, no exceptions." Karoline agreed without hesitation. She didn't care about rules or protocols. She just wanted to stop Ethan before it was too late. The drive to the mountains was tense and quiet. The team consisted of Laura, Ryan, Karoline, and a small group of armed agents specially trained for high-risk operations. As they climbed higher into the rugged terrain, the air grew colder and the roads narrower. Snow blanketed the trees and ground, muffling the sound of their vehicles as they approached the abandoned facility. When they arrived, the building loomed ahead of them, its windows shattered and walls covered in ivy. It looked like a ghost of its former self, a relic of secrets long buried. The agents fanned out, weapons drawn as they moved cautiously toward the entrance. Inside, the facility was eerily silent. Dust coated every surface, and the faint smell of decay lingered in the air. Broken equipment and scattered papers littered the floors, remnants of experiments conducted decades ago. Karoline led the way, her senses on high alert. She could feel something, a presence, a disturbance, but she couldn't pinpoint its source. "This place gives me the creeps," one of the agents muttered under his breath. "Stay focused," Laura ordered. "We're looking for signs of recent activity." As they explored deeper into the facility, they found evidence that someone had been there recently. Footprints in the dust, fresh scratches on the walls, discarded supplies, but no sign of Ethan himself. Just when it seemed like they were chasing shadows, Karoline stopped abruptly, her breath catching in her throat. "What is it?" Ryan asked, noticing her reaction. "He's here," Karoline whispered. "I can feel him." Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness. A low hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. Then, without warning, the temperature dropped sharply, sending shivers down everyone's spines. "Spread out," Laura commanded, her voice cutting through the tension. "Find him." The agents moved quickly, searching every corner of the facility. But it wasn't until they reached the main control room that they finally came face to face with Ethan Cole. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by glowing panels and humming machinery. His appearance was striking. Tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through them. There was an aura of confidence around him, as if he knew he was untouchable. "Well, well," Ethan said, his voice smooth and mocking. "Look who decided to join the party. Ethan Cole," Laura said, stepping forward. "You're under arrest." Ethan laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Arrest me? You think your little badges mean anything here? I'm beyond your laws, your rules. I'm a god among insects." Karoline stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "Ethan, stop this. You're making a mistake." Ethan's gaze shifted to her, and for a brief moment, his expression softened. "Karoline," he said almost fondly. "Still clinging to your humanity, I see. Pathetic." "It doesn't have to be this way," Karoline pleaded. "You can still walk away." "No," Ethan replied, his tone hardening. "This ends now. With me." Without warning, he raised his hand, and the room erupted into chaos. Lights exploded, sparks flying everywhere. The agents scrambled for cover as Ethan unleashed a wave of energy that sent furniture flying and shook the very foundation of the building. Karoline closed her eyes, focusing all her strength on resisting his attack. She could feel her own powers awakening, pushing against the flood of energy threatening to overwhelm her. It was a battle of wills, a clash of forces neither side could afford to lose. "Karoline!" Ryan shouted, trying to reach her amidst the destruction. "Get out of there!" But Karoline stood her ground, her determination unwavering. She knew this was her fight, and hers alone. If she failed, Ethan would destroy everything. And if she succeeded, well, that remained to be seen. As the battle raged on, the outcome hung precariously in the balance. The energy in the room crackled like lightning, filling the air with a deafening hum. Ethan stood tall and unshaken, his arms outstretched as waves of invisible force pulsed from him, tearing apart the walls, shattering glass, and sending agents scrambling for cover. Karoline remained rooted to the spot, her eyes locked on Ethan's, her body trembling but refusing to give way. She could feel the weight of his power pressing down on her, trying to crush her resolve. But she fought back. "You're wasting your time, Ethan," Karoline said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "This isn't justice, it's destruction." Ethan smirked, his blue eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. "Justice? You think I care about justice? No, Karoline. This is about truth, about showing the world what they've done to us, what they've hidden from everyone. And how many innocent people will die because of you?" Karoline shot back. "Is that what you want? To be just another monster?" Her words struck a nerve. For a split second, Ethan hesitated, his expression flickering with doubt, but then he shook it off, his confidence returning stronger than ever. Monsters? We were made into monsters by their greed, their lies. If anyone deserves punishment, it's them. Before Karoline could respond, Ethan unleashed another surge of energy. This time, it was directed straight at her. The force hit her like a freight train, knocking her off her feet and slamming her against the far wall. Pain exploded through her body, and for a moment, she thought she wouldn't be able to get up. But something inside her snapped, a spark of defiance that refused to let her give up. Laura and Ryan watched helplessly from behind overturned tables, using them as makeshift shields. They wanted to intervene, to protect Karoline, but they knew they were powerless against Ethan's abilities. Their weapons were useless here. This was a battle fought on a completely different level. "Do something," Ryan shouted over the noise, desperation creeping into his voice. "We can't just sit here." "I know," Laura yelled back, her mind racing. "But what can we do? He's not human anymore." As if hearing their exchange, Ethan turned his attention toward the agents. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a burst of energy hurtling toward them. The table they were hiding behind shattered into pieces, forcing them to dive aside. One of the other agents wasn't so lucky. A stray blast caught him squarely in the chest, sending him sprawling to the ground unconscious. Karoline saw this and felt a surge of anger rise within her. Enough was enough. Pushing herself to her feet, she focused all her strength, drawing deep from the reservoir of power she had kept buried for so long. Her hands began to glow faintly, a soft golden light emanating from her fingertips. She clenched her fists, channeling every ounce of determination she had left. "You don't get to decide who lives or dies," Karoline shouted, stepping forward. Her voice echoed through the room, cutting through the chaos like a knife. "Not anymore," Ethan sneered, clearly amused by her attempt to stand up to him. "You really think you can stop me? After all these years of hiding, of pretending to be weak? Pathetic." But Karoline didn't respond. Instead, she closed her eyes and reached out with her mind, searching for the connection she shared with Ethan, a bond forged by the same experiments that created them both. It was risky, dangerous even, but she had no other choice. Slowly, she extended her awareness, probing the edges of his consciousness until she found what she was looking for. And then, with a sudden burst of effort, she struck. Ethan staggered backward, clutching his head as if struck by an invisible blow. His confident smirk faltered, replaced by a look of shock and confusion. What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice wavering for the first time. "I'm ending this," Karoline replied, her tone icy. She pushed harder, delving deeper into his mind, disrupting the flow of energy he relied on to maintain control. It was like unraveling a tangled thread, pulling apart the fabric of his power piece by piece. The room grew quieter as Ethan's attacks weakened, the violent surges of energy fading into nothingness. The agents cautiously emerged from their hiding spots, watching in stunned silence as Karoline held Ethan in her mental grip. Even Laura and Ryan couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was as though she had become something entirely new, something beyond human. "Stop resisting," Karoline commanded, her voice firm. "It's over." For a moment, Ethan looked like he might fight back, his jaw tightening with stubborn pride. But then slowly, his shoulders slumped, and he collapsed to his knees, exhausted. The glow in his eyes dimmed, leaving only the hollow stare of a man who had finally been defeated. Laura stepped forward, holstering her weapon and pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Ethan Cole, you're under arrest," she said, her voice carrying a note of finality. As she approached him, Ryan moved to assist, ensuring he wouldn't try anything reckless. Karoline watched silently as they secured Ethan, her body trembling from the effort it had taken to subdue him. She felt drained, empty, as though she had poured everything she had into that single confrontation. But there was also a sense of relief, a quiet satisfaction that she had done what needed to be done. Once Ethan was restrained, Laura turned to Karoline. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Karoline nodded weakly. "I'll be fine," she said, though her legs felt like jelly beneath her. "Just give me a minute." Ryan glanced around the ruined control room, taking stock of the damage. Several agents lay injured but alive, while others worked quickly to secure the area. Despite the carnage, they had succeeded in capturing Ethan before he could carry out his plan. Still, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that this victory came at a cost, one they might not fully understand yet. "What happens now?" he asked, looking at Karoline. She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Now we clean up the mess. All of it." Back at FBI headquarters, the aftermath of the operation unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. Agents combed through the evidence, recovered from the mountain facility, piecing together the full scope of Project Aegis and its implications. News of Ethan's capture spread rapidly, though details were kept tightly under wraps to prevent public panic. Meanwhile, Alan Price was placed under protective custody, his role in the project scrutinized more closely than ever. Karoline, however, remained a mystery. While some viewed her as a hero for stopping Ethan, others saw her as a potential threat, an unknown variable in an already unstable equation. Laura and Ryan found themselves caught in the middle, torn between gratitude for her actions and uncertainty about what to do with her next. "She saved us," Laura argued during a private meeting with their supervisor. "Without her, we wouldn't have stood a chance against Ethan." "And what happens when she decides she doesn't need us anymore?" the supervisor countered. "People like her, people like him, they're unpredictable, dangerous." Ryan frowned. "She's not like Ethan. She proved that." "Maybe," the supervisor conceded. "But we can't take chances, not with something this big." In the end, a compromise was reached. Karoline would remain under FBI protection, serving as both a resource and a safeguard in case any other subjects from Project Aegis resurfaced. In return, she would cooperate fully with their investigation, sharing everything she knew about the program and its participants. For Karoline, the decision was bittersweet. On one hand, she was grateful to have allies who understood, at least partially, the burden she carried. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the lingering sense of unease that came with being constantly watched, studied, and questioned. Still, she accepted the arrangement, knowing it was better than the alternative. Days turned into weeks as the FBI worked tirelessly to dismantle the remnants of Project Aegis. Documents were analyzed, connections traced, and secrets uncovered. It was a daunting task, one that would likely take years to complete. But for the first time in a long time, Karoline allowed herself to hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, The truth could set them free, not just from the shadows of the past, but from the fear of what they had become. One evening, as she sat alone in a small office provided by the agency, Karoline opened the leather folder she had brought with her. Inside were the last few documents she hadn't shared yet, pages filled with notes, diagrams, and cryptic messages scrawled in the margins. Among them was a single photograph, faded with age, showing a group of scientists standing beside a young boy and girl. The caption read, "Test subjects K482 and E517. Karoline stared at the image, her heart heavy with memories she couldn't escape. The boy in the picture was Ethan, his youthful face brimming with curiosity and promise. The girl was her, wide-eyed and uncertain, unaware of the path that lay ahead. Closing the folder, she sighed deeply. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, sacrifices, and moments of doubt. But as long as she kept moving forward, as long as she kept fighting, she knew she could find a way to make things right. Because sometimes, even in the darkest moments, there's still a glimmer of light, and Karoline Leavitt intended to follow that light wherever it led. Weeks had passed since Ethan Cole's capture, but the FBI headquarters remained a hive of activity. The fallout from Project Aegis was far-reaching, touching every corner of the government and beyond. Files were being reviewed, witnesses questioned, and secrets unearthed that no one wanted to see the light of day. For Karoline Leavitt, life had taken on a strange rhythm. She spent her days assisting agents in piecing together the puzzle of the project, while grappling with the weight of what she had done and what she still might have to do. Laura Hayes and Ryan Mitchell became her closest allies during this time. They weren't just colleagues anymore, they were friends who understood the burden she carried. Laura often checked in on her, bringing coffee or sitting quietly as Karoline sifted through old documents late into the night. Ryan, ever practical, helped her navigate the bureaucratic maze of the agency, ensuring she wasn't overwhelmed by demands she couldn't meet. But despite their support, Karoline knew she stood apart. She was different now, not entirely human, not entirely safe. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast long shadows across the city, Karoline sat alone in the small office assigned to her. The leather folder lay open on the desk, its contents spread out like pieces of a broken mirror reflecting fragments of her past. She stared at the photograph again, the one of herself and Ethan as children. Her fingers traced the edges of the image lingering over Ethan's face. He had been so full of hope back then, so eager to change the world. Somewhere along the way, that hope had twisted into something darker, more dangerous. And now he was gone, locked away in a maximum security facility designed to hold people like him. Karoline sighed and closed the folder, pushing it aside. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a moment. The silence of the room was comforting, a rare break from the constant noise of investigations and interrogations. But even in the quiet, her mind raced. What would happen next? Would there be others like Ethan? Others who wouldn't stop until the truth came out? Or worse, others who saw themselves as gods, untouchable and unstoppable? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. "Come in," she called, opening her eyes. Laura stepped inside, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like you could use this," she said, handing one to Karoline. "Thanks," Karoline replied, taking the cup gratefully. The warmth seeped into her hands, grounding her in the present moment. "How are you holding up?" Laura asked, pulling up a chair beside her. "I'm okay," Karoline said after a pause. "Just thinking." "About Ethan?" Karoline nodded. "Yeah, about everything. I keep wondering if I made the right choice, if stopping him was enough." "You did the only thing you could," Laura assured her. "He left you no other option." "I know," Karoline admitted. "But sometimes I wonder if I could have saved him. If I could have brought him back instead of letting him turn into whatever he became." Laura hesitated before speaking. "People make choices, Karoline. Ethan chose revenge over redemption. You can't blame yourself for that." "I guess." Karoline sipped her coffee, letting the bitterness wake her up. "Still, it feels unfinished, like there's more waiting for us." Laura didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced at the files scattered across the desk. "Do you think there are others?" she asked finally. "Other subjects?" Karoline set down her cup and looked at Laura. "I don't know. Maybe. Alan mentioned a few names, but most of them disappeared years ago. Some might be dead, others—" She trailed off, her voice dropping slightly. "Others might be hiding, waiting for the right moment to step forward. And if they do," Laura pressed, "then we'll deal with it," Karoline said firmly. "We'll find them before they become another Ethan." The next morning, the team gathered in the main conference room to discuss their progress. The walls were lined with whiteboards covered in notes, timelines, and photographs of key figures involved in Project Aegis. At the center of the table sat a map marked with red pins indicating locations tied to the project, research facilities, crash sites, and hidden laboratories. "We've identified several leads," Ryan began, addressing the group. "Most of these places are abandoned now, but we're sending teams to investigate anyway. There's always a chance someone or something is still there." "What about Alan?" an agent asked. "Has he given us anything new?" Ryan shook his head. "Not much. He's cooperating, but he seems to be holding back. Either he doesn't know everything or he's scared to tell us." "That makes two of us," muttered another agent under their breath. Karoline listened intently, her gaze fixed on the map. One location stood out to her, a remote cabin deep in the Appalachian Mountains. It wasn't marked with a pin, but she recognized the coordinates from the documents she'd reviewed. Something about it felt familiar, like a memory tugging at the edge of her mind. "That cabin," she said suddenly, pointing to the spot on the map. "It's where they kept us after the experiments, where they monitored our abilities." The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at her. "Are you sure?" Laura asked. "Yes," Karoline replied. "If there's anyone else out there, that's where they'll be." Ryan studied the map for a moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll check it out. But we go in prepared, no assumptions, no shortcuts." The decision was made quickly, and within hours a team was assembled to head to the cabin. Karoline insisted on joining them despite protests from both Laura and Ryan. "I need to see it for myself," she said. "If there's anyone left, they'll trust me more than anyone else." Reluctantly, the agents agreed, knowing she was right. By nightfall, they were en route to the mountains, driving through winding roads surrounded by dense forests. The air grew colder as they climbed higher, the stars above obscured by thick clouds. When they finally arrived at the cabin, it was almost midnight. The structure was weathered and worn, its wooden walls sagging under the weight of time. Windows were boarded up, and the porch creaked ominously under their footsteps. Inside, the air smelled musty, and dust coated every surface. It was clear no one had been here in years, but something about the place felt alive, as though it remembered what had happened within its walls. As they searched the cabin, Karoline's senses tingled. She could feel traces of energy lingering in the air, faint echoes of those who had once lived here. In one of the back rooms, she found a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside was a small metal box containing journals, photographs, and handwritten notes detailing the lives of the subjects. "These belong to them," Karoline whispered, flipping through the pages. "Their stories, their struggles." Laura knelt beside her, examining the items. "This is incredible," she said softly. "It's like a time capsule of everything they went through." Karoline nodded, her throat tight with emotion. They deserve to be remembered. Not as experiments, but as people. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about stopping threats or uncovering secrets. It was about honoring those who had been lost, giving them a voice when no one else would. As dawn broke over the mountains, the team packed up the evidence and prepared to leave. On the drive back, Karoline stared out the window, watching the trees blur past. She thought about the faces in the photographs, the voices captured in the journals. They had been her family once, however briefly, and now she was determined to make sure their legacy wasn't forgotten. When they returned to headquarters, the work continued. Files were updated, reports written, and plans made for the future. But amidst the chaos, Karoline found moments of peace, moments where she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to balance her powers with her humanity, to use what she had been given, not as a weapon, but as a tool for good. One afternoon, as she walked through the bustling halls of the FBI building, she stopped in front of a large window overlooking the city. Below, cars moved like ants, and people hurried about their daily lives, oblivious to the battles being fought behind closed doors. Karoline smiled faintly, feeling a spark of hope ignite within her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them. Because she wasn't alone anymore. She had allies, friends, and a mission worth fighting for, and as long as she held on to that, she knew she could find her way forward, one step at a time.